What piece of junk did you find that turned out to be valuable? Years ago I bought a condo in foreclosure. We couldn't go inside. Just look from outside and put in a bid. My bid won. When I went inside the place it was pretty trashed. I checked all the rooms, calculating the costs of getting it back into shape. At the end of my walkthrough I went into the garage and saw there was a car under a tarp. I pulled the tarp back and saw a 1972 Barracuda in nearly mint condition. I found a very small, round piece of metal on the floor in my workplace. I couldn't figure out what the item was and knew I should just discard it, but felt compelled to keep it for some reason. That afternoon my co-worker was distraught. The unique type of battery that her cochlear implant needed fell out and was probably in a dumpster somewhere because the cleaners had come through. I gave her the weird piece of metal in my pocket, and she almost burst into tears from relief. Reminds me of when my wristwatch got ripped from my arm playing football on grass. The pin that holds the band to the clock party flew out and I managed to find it in the grass in under 5 minutes. I found a small envelope with a few inches of wire in a junk shop. Bought it, $2 because it had some faded penciling about Troy's. Turned out to about 1.5 troy ounces of platinum wire. Sold it for $600. Well, a dickhead couch surfer who crashed in my guest room for a few months left behind a 1970s Fender Super Twin Tube amp worth $1,800 he didn't know about. It made cleaning up his piss bottles worth it. A few years ago, I was looking through the Goodwill website that lets you bid on stuff that you find. I stumbled across one of the Texas Goodwill's pages, and then saw an auction for a huge box of phone accessories that no one was bidding on. I started looking through all the pictures, started researching some of the brands, and started realizing the whole box was worth a decent bit. I took a shot and made my bid. Someone else saw what I saw and started a bidding war with me, but I eventually won with a bid of $106, then $24 for shipping. Few days go by, and I finally get the box. Well, 2 boxes, and they were both huge. Started taking inventory, and ended with 100 iPhone chargers, 100 Android chargers, about 250 iPhone 8 cases in all different styles, 80 battery packs, a few iPad cases, and about 1,000 screen protectors. Turned my $130 total investment into an eBay business, and made almost $8,000 in about 9 months. Edit. A word. So my family went to a nearby town's vintage sale thing. My dad found this dirty old glass milk bottle, and he got excited when he found it. I didn't know what he found so exciting since it was just a milk bottle. After we got home, he explained that it was a milk bottle from a dairy farm. One of the co-founders of that farm was my great-great-grandfather on my dad's side. When one of the world wars began, he sold it off to the other founder. TLDR, my dad found a glass milk bottle, and I found out I'm a descendant of wealthy dairy farmers. I was at an estate sale and bought a few paintings. Sweet lady told me to take the last one I liked as package deal since I ran out of cash. Turns out one of them is a pretty rare original print worth about $3,500 and I paid maybe $30 for all 4 prints and paintings I wanted. My aunt died. Cancer. Tragic. My family did what they always do. Go into mine mode. There was a tiny painting I always liked. I asked my cousin. She could have cared less. She's gotta have the 10-year-old book. Fight. The painting is worth a crazy amount. The car is in the dump now. I will have the painting forever. Someone gave me a hideous purse out of a box on its way to Goodwill. I sold it on eBay for $1. 100. I've had some good flips, but that was the best. Was it some expensive brand or something? I know purses can get expensive but assumed not much resale value. Weird painting of a cat with birds on its back no one wanted. Paid $20. Worth $400. Investments on paintings happen like that. My mom got a painting for $300. But after a while, it now costs $15,000. She is waiting to sell it. Dad carried around a junk guitar for 50 years. Ugly as hell sunburst Gibson acoustic, circa 50s or 60s, can't remember, that he eventually sanded down into something prettier. When I was learning, he took it to be tuned up by our neighbor who owned a shop and was a collector. Dude came back exasperated and told us that my dad had sanded about $50K off the guitar, and that it would have been totally worthless if he hadn't left the logo on. My friends and I were at a concert and found this broken bracelet under a merch table as we were about to leave the venue. It had an interesting engraving on it. Something about being a son and friend. Because it was broken, we were thinking about just tossing it, but ended up throwing it in our backpack to bring to the office later. My friend worked at the venue, so she was going to turn it in. The next week I was browsing Reddit on a thread of the same kind of music we were listening to at the show, and just as I was about to fall asleep, someone's post caught my eye. It said something like, "This is a long shot but I lost something." And it piqued my interest, so I clicked it. It was someone from that same show asking if anyone had found a silver bracelet. Turns out it was the same one we found, and it seemed to be a special gift from the person's parent and they were looking for it. We connected and got the bracelet returned to the guy. And the whole interaction is actually in my Reddit history. It's a fun, albeit quick, read. A really old dollar bill I found in an old Bible. It's worth around $100. I was staying at a hotel with some colleagues and somehow the conversation turned to talking about how some people will leave money in hotel Bibles for people. One of my friend's partners was skeptical. Turned over the Bible in the room and out floated a $1. Bought an old copy of The Wizard of Oz at a flea market for $30. When I got home and researched it more, it turned out to be a first edition. My family Bible. It disappeared for a while. Years ago a sibling of mine passed away. I was helping her children clean out her attic when I stumbled upon a box filled with old books. I was going through them and found one that was tattered and in rough shape. I was about to toss it aside when I decided to open up. Turns out it was the family Bible with a filled out family tree going back to the early 1700s. Quite the find. Indeed. It's still in my possession. Would you believe my paternal grandfather was born in 1805? I would not have known that exact date had I not found it. Well, if my mom were to respond to this thread. Original Harry Potter 1st edition Philosopher's Stone novel. It's very rare to find them and they sell pretty well, but she threw it out. So salty. My mum sold my complete collection of Animorphs books at a garage sale for $2 because she thought it was great to encourage reading or something. The woman who bought them didn't have a child with her, so I really think she just eBayed them most likely. Old folded up piece of paper in the bottom of a box. Torn up and faded. Turned out to be a 90-year-old original Giancarlo poster worth roughly $20. 000 after spending $1. 000 for restoration. My siblings. Turns out organs are actually pretty expensive. Found a fake Cartier watch at Goodwill for $10. Bought it because it still looked nice. But it's a real Cartier watch and it's worth $1,000 plus. Keeping it because I'd never buy myself something like that. Retro video game consoles, games and electronics. I love them because I love them. But they are often very valuable as well. I used to buy these things way before it was popular. Like buying a full Sega Genesis, Sega CD, 32X and a ton of games for like $40 back in the day. Nowadays that shit is a goldmine. That's pretty cool. I'm not really sure why these are so scarce in North America, not sure about other regions. Like Europe. In Japan. You can find a lot of second-hand retro consoles for sale in most major cities. Bought a 1970s Roland TR-66 drum machine, grandly to the 808, for $7 at a flea market. All analog and made some cool noises. Had a lot of fun with it. Turns out it's worth several $100s or something. It had colorful buttons but cheesy wood grain sides and back. We had it stashed away in the garage for a bit with some shitty thrift store speakers. Also wood grain. One day when we cleared out junk, my dad tossed it. While, for some unknown reason, keeping the speakers. Needless to say, I was a little pissed. Well, easy come easy go. When I was 17, I found a driver's license on the ground from a guy who was 22 and resembled me a fair bit. Rarely had a problem getting into bars or clubs with it. It was priceless tbh. My friend did this years ago in college. At some point later in the year he was pulled over and had forgotten to swap his real ID back into his wallet after a night out and got pulled over. Gave the cop the fake ID on accident and got into a whole lawsuit for identity fraud or theft or some shit. About 22 years ago I found a ring in a parking lot. Gave it to the cops for 90 days and nobody asked about it. It turned out to be worth over $1,000. Then last year I found a ring in a parking lot. Gave it to the cops for 90 days and nobody asked about. It turned out to be worth $40. I also was dicking around in a random old gold mine when I was around 12 and found a pretty decently sized nugget. That was worth $1,800, but I carried it around in my pocket for good luck. Then I lost it. Oh well. I also found a fair few bits of jade in a river. Probably a few $100s worth, but I gave them out to friends. And my last decent find was 2 fossilized vertebrae of some sort. Sent them to the aquarium to have them examined. They are about 7 million years old and a dolphin relative. Apparently worthless, but I really like them. They are in my fish tank. Not exactly junk. But I bought 2 vintage Pyrex bowls at a thrift store. Had no idea that style's actually collectible. I just needed a mixing bowl. And they were the same kind my mom had, so I knew they were good. Sturdy bowls. Not sure exactly how much they're worth. But definitely more than the $10 or so I paid for the pair. Yep. The older Pyrex are better because the material used is of better higher quality. The newer Pyrex baking dishes often shatter when in use. Good grab. Cleaning out my grandparents' house after my grandma passed away and had to throw out or donate actual hundreds of books. Most were worth nothing and very worn down. In the second to last box were original copies of the Harry Potter books. She bought each one on the day of their release. In 2004 my grandfather showed me a locked chest in the storage of his home when I was 15. Then he said to me, the key is on my cabinet. The promised me to open it when he dies. I kept his promise until he died this January 2020. He died at 101 years old. I got the keys of the locked chest on his cabinet, then opened the chest. When I opened it, the things in there were mostly love letters, encyclopedias, maps, records from famous singers. But the valuable thing I found was jewelry and a Rolex and Seiko watch, which is under perfect condition. A 1973 Honda 250 Elsinore. Picked it up for $100. Rode it until it died, put a couple $100 in it, rode it some more. Eventually it wasn't worth fixing and it was trashed. Learned later it could be worth as much as $10. 000 in good shape. Bought a cheap Martin guitar because I was broke and wanted to play. I didn't think much of it at the time. But it's worth a few grand now because it was a limited edition thing. It's still appreciating to the point where I had to insure it. An old coin just in the middle of a field when taking my dog out. I looked it up and it was an old English penny, which was cool. Worth between $5 and $25. Or thereabouts. Keep it in my wallet. Was fishing at family's cottage, pulled up a fishing rod, which turned out to be the one my grandfather, passed away, got as a birthday present and loved it, but lost about 8 years ago. A couple years ago I bought a rifle bipod at an antique store for like $15. I was going to keep it for an airsoft gun. But it didn't have any markings on it and couldn't figure out what it was. So I made a post on a gun forum asking for info. Turns out I bought a 65-ish-year-old bipod for an experimental version of the M14 rifle. There were only about 5 of my bipod ever made. And the guys sent me pictures from a rifle museum backing it all up. I sold it a day later for $400. But they told me if I found the right buyer it'd be worth $800 $1,000. When I was younger, I would rummage around the drawers and cabinets in my grandmother's house. Just adventuring and discovering. Which is what I called it. I happened to find this old folded piece of paper. But it only took 3 seconds for me to just disregard it and push it aside. I think I was trying to get something else that I saw. After I finished with whatever I had, I picked up the piece of paper to throw it away. Out of childlike curiosity. I opened it up and saw the words in it. It looked like a letter. It seemed important. So I gave it to my grandmother, who gave it to my mother when she came to pick me up. My grandmother is blind. Come to find out, it was a love letter from my grandfather to my grandmother. That really made their day. When I was a little kid, I liked to climb under and hide inside the racks of clothes when my mom was shopping. One time I found what I thought was one of those cheap 25-cent plastic rings that you put a quarter into the machine and it spits out. I think that was basically my only understanding of what a ring was at that age. But I showed my mom what I had found, and as it turns out it was a massive diamond engagement ring. I specifically remember that it had tape around it, which my mom explained was probably because it was too big. And whoever was wearing it was trying to make it more snug to their finger. We gave it to the teenager girls who were working the cash register, hoping the person who lost it would return looking for it. And it would get returned. My mom says she kind of regrets doing that because she thinks that the girls probably pawned it and split cash. Probably should have taken it to the police or something. But who knows? I like to think that it did make its way back to the rightful owner. My dad and I are both mechanics and engineers. We both try to see how many tools we can find on the side of the road. It's shocking how many things are left behind at work sites or else fall off of trucks. A few of the things we've found. 2 framing hammers. 2 measuring tapes. A 40 inches push broom. Various ratchet straps. A functional fluke multimeter. A 5 feet crowbar. And various other odds and ends. Always keep your eyes peeled. Sometimes this pastime can be dangerous when it involves pulling over on the highway, so be careful. My mom in college worked for a small grocery store. She was sweeping aisles one day when she found a bracelet and just threw it in the lost and found for someone to come back for later. Months went by and I guess the employees got to check the lost and found for anything they wanted if no one claimed it. She remembered the bracelet and just grabbed it. She got it home and cleaned it up. It ended up being a Tivol bracelet wrapped with real diamonds. It's since been turned into a new wedding band for her, lol. I picked up an ancient looking Striker Model 810 autopsy saw for $10 at an estate sale. Beautiful chrome body. Solid feel. Deco styling. They still make the thing and a new one is $1,200. I sold it for $500 to a pathologist in Florida. I made a demonstration video with it to show that it worked. It racked up 20k views after Jamal Khashoggi was murdered. An old book in my grandfather's attic. It was slightly worn and seemed super boring. But I held onto it because I feel weird throwing away book. Turns out it is a first edition of a book that is over 100 years old and is worth a couple $1,000 even in its condition. I collect Pabst Blue Ribbon stuff. I have a cup full of bottle caps. The Pabst bottle caps have playing card number suits under them. I haven't gone through my caps in a while, but I wanted to see if I was any closer to having a full deck. So I empty my caps out onto the table and all of a sudden a coin falls out. A 1937 Washington quarter. 90% silver. I have no idea where it came from. My weird cap collection found me some silver. When I was working a mold and water damage technician, we got a call where this dude's house flooded while he was on vacation. Came home to everything wet and moldy. So it was all going to be replaced. As we're documenting the damaged items, I come across an original recording of Woodstock from 1970. Still in great condition. Homeowner said he didn't want to risk keeping it, so I cleaned the mold off with some ammonium and took it home. Later found records in similar condition online for $200 $300. Not selling mine though. My post history. I had amassed a lot of karma. I won't tell you how much. But let's just say I was easily getting over 2k per year without really trying. I found out that once your username gets known in some sense and if your karma is high enough you can sell your account for BTC on the dark web. Needless to say, I did so. I got a box of someone's old video games once. It was just a bunch of dumb looking GameCube and PS2 games. Like Wall-E and Mario Party 4. One of the games caught my attention though. Haunting Ground for the PS2. With the case and manual. I didn't know anything about it. And had no intentions of playing it. So it just sat there. Collecting dust on a shelf. A couple months later. I looked it up. And found out that it's worth around $400. And is one of the most valuable games for the PS2. So, yeah. I bought an as-is Nintendo 64 with 2 controllers from a pawn shop a few years ago for $30. After a quick clean it's worked perfectly ever since. I still excitedly tell people how cheap it was whenever we bust it out. My dad ordered some LEDs and the company shipped white and blue LEDs by accident. This was when those were really expensive. 50 LEDs. He resold them on the trading post.